Okay, balancing the quality system part two. Now, in part one, we looked at the different customers of the quality system and the requirement to have a more balanced quality system such that you met the requirements of those three customer groups. So you've got business health, which is basically the financials. You've got customer experience, which is obviously the end customer and the patient. But you've also got the regulatory compliance aspects in terms of making sure your quality system meets the regulations and standards of your particular industry. So in this session, we're really going to talk about if you're going to move your quality system to a more customer-centric position, what does that really mean in practice? What do you specifically have to do to the quality system to begin to recenter it? Now, making changes to a quality system is no different than making changes to a house in terms of a renovation, because very often we inherit a quality system that's not in a position where we actually want it to be, and we want to make changes to it. And similarly, very often we buy a house that's actually not in the sort of perfect condition that we want it to be, and we want to make some changes over time to a position that is a house we want to live in. So very often we inherit a house that looks a bit like the one on the left in terms of it's a bit dilapidated. It needs a bit of work and it needs a bit of TLC to move it to a position where we're actually quite happy to live in it. Similarly, when you're making changes to a house, there are different customers you need to satisfy. You need to satisfy, obviously, yourself in terms you want to live in the house that meets your expectations. Obviously there's building regulations that you actually have to adhere to. If you make changes to the house, you just can't make any changes. So there's a regulatory compliance aspect to it, and obviously there's a financial aspect to it in terms of obviously making any renovation costs money in terms of time and effort and resources. So very often you haven't got a bottomless pit of money to make these changes. So there is actually sort of the money aspect to it in terms of making a renovation to a property that you want to live in. And similarly, it's very similar to a quality system. When you want to move it to a position where you want it to be, you're going to have to look at the quality system through three different eyes in terms of their perspectives, in terms of those three different customers. You've got to meet a regulatory requirement. You've got to meet the requirements of the end customer, and obviously you've got to meet the requirements of the financial shareholder in terms of making sure the quality system is efficient and doesn't cost excessive money to maintain and run. So similarly, when you inherit a quality system that may be a bit more dilapidated than you want, I think one of the first things you need to do, and similarly, if you inherited a house that was a bit dilapidated and run down, is really to actually to gain control. You need to really look at the things that are no-brainers within the quality system, and similarly in a house, you do things that are obvious and apparent at the very beginning. So if windows are broken that need replacing, you replace them. If doors are broken, if locks needs fixing, very often there's obvious things within the house that you do straight away. You wouldn't sit down and do a project plan and have a meeting, etc. They're very obvious activities you need to do to gain control. And similarly within a quality system, there are activities at the very beginning that are very obvious. They're staring in your face. So if you've got a problem with adherence to basic GMP, you need to address that head on. If you've got special cause events that are actually apparent, you need to start addressing. You really do need to look at your processes and start to regain some form of statistical control in terms of getting control over those events. And as we come on to standardization later, it's very important that you don't sort of standardize something that is out of control. And really basically address chaos. So basically, if it's chaotic within the quality system, you really need to start to look at that straight away. And we'll cover chaotic scenarios later in the module around complexity. But the first phase really is looking at the quality system and really sort of gaining control of things that are obviously broken and you need to fix. And you don't need to do a lot of activity in terms of root cause analysis or brainstorming to work out what you need to do. Now, similarly, if you inherited a house, one of the first things you do is actually work out what you've got in the house. You do an inventory of the facilities and the rooms and whether the systems are working. So you look at the heating system. Is it functioning? Where are the bedrooms? Are they in good condition? What storage is available? You do a bit of a checklist in terms of what's available and what needs working on, and whether it's functioning or not. So similarly for a quality system, when you inherit it, or you move to a new one, or you're just looking at your quality system now with fresh eyes, you do a sort of inventory of activities in terms of what have you got. So basically, here I'd see you do reviews of procedures, you do interviews, you do surveys, you basically get an understanding as a potentially a new leader of a quality system of what have you got in terms of the inventory within your QMS. And we'll talk more about that when we talk about the module around people, process, and technology, and then when we go on into the later modules in terms of how you build a sort of transformational map for your QMS. But really, this second stage is really sort of building a checklist of what have you got within either your house, but in this case, it's what have you got within your quality system in terms of systems and procedures and processes. Now, the next stage really is basically spring cleaning. So, similarly in the house, one of the first activities you do is basically do a session of spring cleaning. You throw out the things that you don't need. And in terms of looking at the quality system, there is methodology that's actually applied within manufacturing called 5S, which is a very structured way of actually ordering the workplace. And my preference and my recommendation is you use this methodology, and we'll step through these slides just describing the steps you need to do in terms of how you spring clean the quality system in order to get control and basically remove some of the obvious waste. And so the steps are sort, set in order, shine, standardize, and sustain. And we'll just talk through in the subsequent slides what these steps mean and how they could be applied to the quality system. So again, it's all about gaining control and removing a degree of waste at the first pass in terms of looking at the quality system to basically streamline it. So, and the first step really is sort. And in many ways, these 5 steps are not really rocket science, and basically the first step really is sort out what you need and what you don't need. So basically, if you don't need it, you throw it away in a house. So basically, in a derelict house, you'd go and decide whether you need the bed, whether you need the wardrobes, whether you need the storage facility, what's broken, and basically, if you don't need it, you throw it away, or if you do need it, you store it in a place that you can use it in the future. And it's far easier in a house to actually look at the deadwood because it's very often obvious. You can obviously see things that are broken within a derelict house or a house you need to renovate. Within the quality system, these areas very often will be hidden. The waste is less obvious than in the house, but it's still waste within the system. So when I talk about waste within the quality system, in terms of things that you can throw away, so with the kind of questions you need to ask yourself, are there procedures and documents that you don't need and you don't use? Are there forms of uncontrolled documents in the workplace that you really shouldn't be there? So I'm thinking of things that are outside of the quality system, but which people use to do their jobs and they really shouldn't, like cheat sheets, etc. Um, and the expectation is the control documentation is that it should be within the quality systems that it's needed. So you've got to make a decision whether you throw it out or you actually incorporate such things like cheat sheets into the QMS. And again, even though may have an electronic document management system and it doesn't take up physical space, if you have records within this QMS, very often they cross-reference other procedures, and they will take resources and effort to maintain and keep going and keeping up to date. So really, that even though they physically don't take up space in the same way that a filing cabinet would, electronic records really should be looked at with the same sort of eyes in terms of, do you really need them? Can they be removed? So this first phase is all about working out what you actually need and what you can throw out. And this can take a degree of time because obviously the quality system is very often hidden in terms of it's not in your face in terms of these things being obvious that you need them or not. But this activity at the beginning is really important in terms of really questioning: do you really need this SOP? Do you need this procedure? Is this form used? Has it been ever used, etc.? Now, the next stage in 5S really is around setting order, is actually putting things in actually the right place. Are they available for when they're needed? So basically, you're making sure the procedures and things that you need are close to where they're actually used. So in the house analogy, is the dining room relatively close to the kitchen? Is the pantry within easy reach of the kitchen? So basically, you want things that are actually needed to be close together. Make them close together. Similarly within the QMS, our procedures and instructions for executing the quality system, are they readily available at point of use? Can you access them on the work floor? Can you access them in the offices? And basically, any document that's a challenge to get hold of will obviously be a challenge to comply with, because obviously, if you can't see it and basically read it, it's virtually impossible you're going to actually adhere to it, if it's buried away in a cabinet in another room. And the second question really is, in terms of quality, the quality organization, does it have ready access to the data to make appropriate decisions? So this isn't just availability of procedures, it's really the availability of information in terms of to make decisions. So basically in this stage, you're trying to look at you're looking at the quality system and trying to make sure that the information that you need and the procedures that you need to follow are actually very close to where you need to actually need to execute them. Now, the next stage in 5S is really shine. Is really this stage is really cleaning the areas in a production environment. It would be making sure that the areas are spick and span. So within the QMS, this is less relevant, but it's still relevant. Any area that quality activities have to happen, is it cluttered? Is it disorganized? Does it present itself in the best light during the inspection? And obviously, if an inspector or an auditor comes to an area and it's cluttered and it's dirty and it's disorganized, that really does send the message that maybe your focus on quality and compliance isn't as good as it should be. So really the question you need to look at, is the work area clean and presentable? If you go into the production area, is it covered in post-it notes and such things in terms of or quality records scattered around the place? So is there a feeling that actually there's a high degree of control and conformance within the production area? And not just in the production area, it's also in areas which support production and within the quality environment. Is there a feeling that actually it's well presented? So the next stage is standardize. Well, basically, you need to actually make sure that you standardize the way you perform any activity within the workspace. And within the production environment, this is very often done by visuals in terms of graphics and flowcharts and within procedures to show that actually these are the stages you need to go through to execute a procedure. Another example is in checklists to error-proof the key stages that are required, such that they're carried out in the order that they are actually required. So really, this is all about making sure that if you have an activity within the quality system that needs to be sort of perform the same way each time, how do you tell people that it should be done the same way each time? And very often that's not just by writing words within an SOP. It's actually making sure that it's obvious, more obvious in terms of flow charts and hints and basically those sort of more graphic and visual aspects of procedures, and gone are the days where we can just use words and Word documents. Now we can use videos and such like to make sure that it's very clear when you go into an area what needs to be done and what activities need to be performed in which order. The final set of 5S is really sustain, and that really is making sure that all of the efforts that you've put into the preceding sort of stages you actually don't unravel, and basically you keep on top of it. So basically this is all about auditing and maintaining compliance to the standard you set. So basically within the quality system, it involves regular audit of systems to ensure they're being maintained, making sure you periodically review documents to show to make sure that the information within the document hasn't diverged from reality. Involves making sure your documents are consistent with any new regulations and standards. So really, it require, in terms of periodic review, not just a cursory glance every sort of year in terms of, yes, this is the document. It is a really critical evaluation of whether the document does actually reflect reality, and if it doesn't, really make sure that you either bring reality in conformance with the document, or you change the document to reflect how you want the procedure to be performed. So in 5S is very often applied to sort of physical manufacturing environments in order to gain order within the system, but it's equally applicable to the quality system in terms of gaining order and making sure that basically the dead wood within the quality system is removed. You gain control, and you make sure that that control is sustained over time. And really, all of this is putting your customers central to your thinking. It's all about removing waste, and really, these lean approaches. Basically, you want to look at your quality system with very critical eyes in terms of removing this waste. And the reason is this waste is getting in the way of you delivering value to your customers. So basically, it's preventing you being compliant. It's preventing you making money in terms of it's very inefficient, and it's costly, and it's getting in the way of you delivering products to your customers that are of the quality and the safety and the reliability and on time delivery that they expect. So basically, this waste is not just an activity as you're just turning a wheel. There is a real purpose to it in terms of removing waste that's actually getting in the way of delivering to your customers. Now, when we talk about waste, there's another sort of a methodology within the lean sort of toolbox in terms of removing waste from manufacturing systems. And you may have heard of the concept of the 8 wastes. And in the subsequent slides, we'll just talk through what these 8 wastes mean when you sort of you basically overlay that concept on top of the quality system. Um, so of the 8 waste types, one of the most obvious is things that are defects. So within a house, it's obvious that a defect is a broken fixture or fitting. But when you look at the quality system in terms of what are the defects within the QMS, you can see defects. You can see things that are broken, and examples of these in the top of the slide include, validation deviations, where the validation wasn't executed or couldn't be executed as well as it could. When you don't follow a process that leads to a non-conformance, you've got or incorrect supplier specifications, mistakes in technical reports, quality data that's corrupted. And we'll talk a little bit more about quality data later, where quality objectives and key performance indicators are misaligned, and we've sort of touched on that in the last session. So really, some of the tools within the sort of lean toolbox, which are generally applied to manufacturing, are equally applicable to being applied to the QMS to remove defects. They include checking your specifications, are they the right ones? Standard work to make sure basically work is executed the same each time. Can you change the work process flow such that you can reduce errors in terms of error proofing? Some of the more sort of off-the-shelf methodologies in terms of very structured way of reducing variability within the manufacturing process. Can you use similar methodologies in terms of looking at the QMS, and you can in terms of reducing variability of execution of procedures. Obviously, making the procedures clearer and making sure that your data you use to make decisions is actually verified. And key within all of this is at a higher level is looking at the quality system in terms of management review. Can you devise a better management review process so you actually got greater visibility at the board level in terms of the defects within your QMS, and obviously any errors and issues within the quality system. Can you better apply Kappa in terms of getting to root cause and actually fixing problems? So in the same way you look at a house and there are defects that are very obvious. There are defects within the quality system which occur every day. You may have to sort of dig a bit more to find them, but they're equally valid in terms of they are a form of waste that is preventing you actually delivering value to your customers. So all of these different sort of mistakes and defects are basically they're preventing you delivering value to your customer and then taking up your time and resources to resolve. So obviously, the greater extent you reduce them, the better in terms of your ability to serve your customer. The next waste is inventory. So basically, this is the stuff you buy, and basically raw materials. And in terms of a house, it's, have you more furniture than you need? So obviously it's taking up space, and if you don't need it, then really you should decide whether you need to remove it. Any inventory takes up some form of resource in terms of obviously cleaning it and maintaining it. And if you look at the quality system, there is the same sort of types of inventory, though they're less obvious within the QMS. So if you've got excessive number of records, obviously for every record you have to go through some degree of periodic review. So it does take some degree of maintenance. Other forms of inventory that's waste is there information you collect that you don't do anything with? So are there sort of process data flows within your QMS that actually lead to no action or review? So there's a data quality data that's never reviewed, but it's collected and goes into reports nobody reads, or even quality records that are no longer needed. So similarly, into manufacturing, you can start to do some things about this in terms of obviously reducing the number of controlled documents would significantly help. Any non-relevant information in procedures in terms of pruning it back. If the information isn't there, it doesn't need to be reviewed as an ongoing basis in terms of periodic review. Do you need these specifications? Are they critical to the function of your product or your service? Can they be removed? Is there any information in forms that you capture that is actually not really needed? So a critical evaluation of your forms and documentation to decide whether actually that information isn't needed, because obviously if you are capturing it, it takes resource and time and effort to actually do so. So really looking at the QMS with the question is, do you really need it within the QMS? Is it excessive inventory that you can remove? Because as I said, any inventory comes at a degree of cost in terms of its maintenance. The next form of waste is waiting. So in terms of the QMS, this is very obvious. It's always waiting for the approval of documents. It's waiting for approval of batch records. It's waiting for a point resource to become available. Very often within a quality organisation, there's only one or two people that are approved to sign or approve or release a certain type of product. So there's very often this waiting for that person to become available. Obviously, in manufacturing, if there's any testing before the release of product, there's waiting for those results to be generated. A bigger one is waiting for management approval. And again, related to that is waiting for a critical meeting to happen, and you can't move forward until you have that meeting. So really, if you can reduce the waiting time within the quality system, that is only a good thing, because basically you can make it flow better. So the bottom half of the slide is some examples of the way to do that. Obviously, if you can reduce the number of signatures that actually you're required to review documents, that's a good thing. If you can bring parts of the organisation that can sign off documents together, so you've got basically a sort of a parallel activity rather than a sequential activity, that can obviously speed things up. If you can move quality in sort of within the operational area, so that there's like a joint approval in terms of there's always a quality individual within the operational cell that can obviously reduce the waiting times. Obviously, cross training such that you can remove these point resources. A big one is, do you need 4 or 5 different quality representatives on a document to approve that document? Are all of those signatures needed? And related to that, does documentation, does it need to move up the management layer to be approved? Can it be approved at a lower level? So really, basically, can those decisions be made at the appropriate level lower down in the organization, such that when you need a decision, you don't have to constantly go up the management chain to get approval. A big one, do you need that meeting? Is it really required to move forward, or is it just giving the illusion that you're actually progressing, and actually it's actually making an important decision? And obviously, technology can make the waiting times for all of these activities um, uh, become reduced, in terms of there's a process flow within the application. So obviously, relating to this is, if you've got a new QMS, a lot of these activities can happen in real time more quickly, rather than moving sort of physical documents around a facility, and actually walking down corridors, getting that signature chain in order to release your document. So again, it's all about reducing the waiting time for your process within the quality system to flow. And in the same way, in manufacturing, if you can reduce waiting for the manufacturing event, you can make that product flow to the customer in better ways, and obviously with reduced costs and higher efficiency gains. The next one is overproduction. So basically, you over manufacture. You produce too much. So in the quality system, overproduction would be, you've got documentation. This goes way beyond the requirements. So basically, another example would, you have multiple copies of documents all saying the same thing, or basically, excessive data that is not required. And again, the ways to address that, ensure that documents have contents that just are needed, that don't go beyond what is required. Again, if you can utilize electronic workflows to remove redundant copies of paper documents and merge documents together, that's a good thing. And again, only collect the data that's actually necessary. Just because you can collect data doesn't mean you should collect data, and you really got to decide whether that data is important in making your quality decision, and it's required for the QMS to run. Now, the next form of waste is motion. So basically, it's waste from excessive movement of people or equipment. It's moving things around. So in the QMS, there's a similar sort of waste in terms of motion. This is searching for documents. Where are they? Moving data from one software application to another. That's very common. Trying to find the right individual to approve a report. You've got to go and physically move. And then even things like walking to the printer and scanner, in terms of you've got to perform an activity before you can do the activity you really want. So again, to reduce motion, electronic systems are really good to allow documentation to be available at the point of need. Again, they can have workflows within them that allow the approval to happen at any location where there's obviously an internet connected PC. And then things like your work cell, where you do your activities within the quality system. But similarly to the operation areas, are they ergonomic? Do you have all the resources at close proximity? Is everything where it's needed? So analogous to this really is can you put quality closer to the operation areas they're supporting? And that may be supply chain, and might be maybe distribution. But really, I will come on to that concept in the later session on people. Can you start to embed your quality organization within your the facilities and the parts of the organization you're designed to support? And then really sort of basically designing workspaces around the individual rather than the other way around. Again, if you can reduce the amount of waste and time, looking for things and finding things, then that can only improve your ability to actually satisfy your three customers of the QMS. Over processing in manufacturing is basically waste from performing things that go far beyond what the customer requires. Again, it's collecting data that's not required. It's duplication of entry. Specifications are actually too tight. Duplicate testing that's not needed, or redundant testing. So similarly, to actually address over processing, do you need specifications? Are they needed at all, or are they too narrow? Do you need to really collect that data? Are parameters within validation documents, do you really need to meet that specification? Are there any activities during income inspection that you still need to perform? So really, are you going above and beyond what you really need to do? And even are there tests that actually can be removed and they're actually adding no value to the whole of your. Yeah, so basically, with over processing within the manufacturing environment is basically going beyond what is needed for the customer to be satisfied. And similarly within the QMS, you're doing more than you actually need to actually satisfy the customer's expectations in terms of quality. Transport is the next way. So it's very similar to motion. It's basically physically moving stuff around. So in the manufacturing environment, that's very obvious in terms of it's moving the raw materials around in terms of transforming it into the end product. But within the QMS, it's analogous. Is basically moving the batch record around with the product, moving reports between departments for signatures, moving data between individuals and between systems. And again, if you can reduce the amount of transportation of information, so basically, can you move the QMS closer to production as possible? Can you replace physical records with electronic systems? Can you connect electronic databases together? They can all help reduce the amount of transportation that you do within your QMS. And again, that is a form of waste that's preventing you adding and delivering value to your customers. The last form of waste is basically people. It's underused, utilized talent in terms of skills and experience, and this really manifests itself within the quality system in terms of is their poor operational flexibility in terms of individuals' ability to sort of cross train and support each other. Um, is your organisation future proof for the needs of the quality organisation going forward? And in a following module, we look at sort of the quality organisation and the QMS potentially of the future in terms of the competencies and skills that you need. So ways of addressing this talent waste is really to develop a thorough training and development program, obviously to cross train. Um, Obviously reward talent so that you can retain it within your organisation. And related to that is do you have the right talent anyway? So basically carry out a skills audit to understand what inventory of talent that you've actually got. And very often organizations, when they do that, they find that actually they're deficient in some talents, but actually they find by doing an inventory they've actually got talents they were completely unaware of. Again, it's basically utilizing your individuals within your organization to utilize all of their skills and talents in a really positive way. And we'll come on to people and sort of manning the quality organisation, not just to meet today's needs, but the sort of the way that the quality is going to potentially change over years to come. And we'll cover that in a later module. So, as I said, these 8 wastes have been applied for many years within production environments, but you can overlay them onto the quality system, and some of them are harder to find, but you can generally find examples of all of them within the QMS. And similarly, that all of these types of wastes are preventing you from satisfying your customers. So to try to find and identify and remove these waste types isn't sort of an intellectual exercise. The reason you're doing it is you're preventing your quality system from being effective. And really, an ongoing theme is basically you should work tirelessly to remove this waste from your system. And you won't be able to do it at the first pass or the second pass. It will be an ongoing system in terms of some of the obvious wastes. The low hanging fruit will be very obvious, but with time you will continually see waste, and the more you look, the more it will be apparent. And very often, at first, it may be invisible to you in terms of seeing it, but there will be a stage you go, yes, I can see this really quite readily now. And the question you will say to yourself, well, why didn't I address this previously? But the reason being is that you weren't looking at the QMS through your customer's eyes, and maybe potentially through a regulatory compliance eyes, and that's not necessarily how you need to look at the quality system in a completely holistic way to again to satisfy those three customer types of the QMS. Now, Both of the methodologies we talked about previously in terms of 5S and the 8 wastes are really arisen from sort of lean thinking. We covered some of the lean, the sort of the background to lean manufacturing in the first session. Now, lean thinking has generally not been applied to the quality system, and I hope in the previous slides I've convinced you that if you look at the quality system with lean eyes, you can actually see the same sort of wastes, and it's equally applicable to apply that methodology to the QMS. But there are drawbacks in lean thinking, and basically it hasn't really fulfilled its true potential, especially within healthcare organisations. And there are a number of reasons for that. And one of the biggest reasons is that generally organizations, and especially healthcare organizations, are not machines. They are complex, changing, evolving systems. And they're not mechanical. So a lot of the methodology that works really well on a production line, where you've got very, sequential, predictable systems where you can control inputs and verify outputs, they don't always work within a QMS. And we'll talk about in a later session on the quality system being a more sort of complex adaptive system and a constantly moving system. It very often doesn't have the parameters and the attributes of a machine. And we'll talk about how to apply some of the newer thinking in terms of how quality systems and organizations actually behave. But saying that, a lot of the lean methodology and the approaches that have been very, very successful in manufacturing, as just a first port of call, if you want to improve your quality system and start to rebalance it, if you apply some of these methodologies to your QMS in terms of 5S and the 8 wastes, that will maybe be a dramatic step forward in terms of improving them. So in the next session, we'll actually look at these different ways of improving the quality system to make it more customer centric. We'll look at it through the eyes of the maturity model in terms of the four stages of the maturity model, and what it means in terms of if you're at each one of the stages, what you need to do practically to get to the next stage, and how basically you can sort of use some of these approaches to move through the different layers of maturity to improve your quality organization. So in the next session, we'll go through some of the actual ways you can move through it in more of a stepwise fashion. And also that will relate to obviously your report that's hopefully been generated, and some of your specific sort of issues you may have in terms of where you are in any of those maturity levels. So please join me in section 3, where we'll talk about some of the aspects of the maturity model, of how it relates to customer service in terms of the quality system and its ability to deliver the customer needs.